Plaquemines Parish is an incredible place. You can tell that the communities that are there have been there for a long time. You can also tell that the industry that's been there has had a huge impact on these communities and the way that they live their daily lives. I've never seen a place in the United States where you can so clearly see the intersection of pollution, environmental injustice, and climate change. So last summer I joined Senator Cory Booker, the U.S. Human Rights Network, and 350.org on a trip to the Deep South to meet people in some of these affected communities.
This is a civil rights issue. Please understand, this is a civil rights issue.
At the Greater Morning Star Church, we heard from parish residents, including Lyric Turner, one of the young members of the Zion Travelers Cooperative Center. Lyric had recently taken a flyover of the parish to see the land lost for herself.
I plan on coming back, probably 30 years from now, having my kids come see their grandmother, their grandfather, their auntie, their uncle, wherever it is, coming back down here. But if nothing is done for us, they can't come back to anything.
The communities I visited in Plaquemines Parish that were dealing with heavy industry and sea level rise the most were black or brown. And really, that's no coincidence. It's not uncommon for black and brown communities to be targeted for industry, landfills, coal mines, pipelines, you name it. This is happening all across the country, not just in Louisiana. Of the 9 million people living near a hazardous waste site, 56% are people of color. And black Americans are 3 times as likely to die from air pollution. These stats are evidence of what the larger movement would call environmental injustice or environmental racism. It's no accident that these communities have industry in their backyard. This is the outcome of decades of public policy and decisions made by people in power. Between Baton Rouge and New Orleans along the Mississippi River lie some of the highest concentrations of industrial plants in the country. The impact of these industries on the surrounding communities are the reason this part of Louisiana is called Cancer Alley. In St. James Parish, residents have watched their once thriving community transform into an industrial zone. Over the years, 15 large-scale industrial plants have moved into the area. Residents say it's because of the impact of these industries that there's such a high rate of cancer in the region.
I'm a resident here in Chapman Town, going on 64 years. I worked in industry for 25 years. I've lived around here 64 years and saw everything to change. 3 months ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
This community has been facing industry in their area for generations, but they're fighting back. Pastor Harry Joseph, the man who runs the church that we visited in St. James, has already filed a lawsuit against companies planning more pipelines and more industry in the area.
I declare that if God is pleased, He's going to take us to do it. And we got to fight for what God has given us, and that's our lives.
Another stop we made on our tour of the Deep South was in Africatown, a small community in Plateau, Alabama. You might have heard of Africatown. It's the home of the last known slave ship to dock in America, nearly 50 years after slavery was abolished. Africatown and Plateau were also the home to the International Paper Company in the 40s and 50s, which provided family-sustaining jobs to all of the communities that lived in the area. For years, the paper company pumped pollution into the air and water of this community, and now we're seeing the long-lasting effect of that pollution on the families that are still there in Africatown.
I have lived in this area most of my life. It was 7 siblings. In my family, there was never a history of cancer, respiratory problems. However, 5 of my siblings have died. And of the 5 that died, 4 of them died with cancer. There are 2 surviving, my brother and myself. I am a twice survivor of cancer. It should not be where parents bury children. That's right. Children bury parents.
Residents of Africatown have already filed a lawsuit against the International Paper Company. The paper company says they didn't do anything wrong, but community members and community leaders like Major Joe Womack say that something has to be done to hold this company accountable. People in cities like Africatown, St. James, Plaquemines Parish, they're up against a whole lot more than industry. They live in conservative states. They have representatives that don't care about them. Oftentimes they're poor or they live in rural areas. But they're still organized. They're fighting every day. They're filing lawsuits. They're showing up to meetings. They're door knocking. And they're voting for people who they feel will make their communities more resilient. Environmental justice has turned into a big talking point in the climate community. But when it comes to funding organizations working on the issue, they are often overlooked and these communities are sometimes underserved. In a broader sense, Organizations working to curb global warming forget to include environmental justice in their policy proposals or their larger campaign initiatives. But in reality, focusing on environmental justice could be how we right some of the wrongs done to Black and brown communities and stop the climate crisis.